I was just trying to survive lunch. That's it. But somehow, in one day, I managed to make the 3 richest heirs in school start a war over me. First was Adrian, the cold heir who ruled the student council like a dictator. He never looked at anyone, let alone me, but when I asked to borrow his pen for math class, he slid me his gold Mont Blanc like it was a binding contract. Now half the school swears we're basically engaged. Then came Leo, the playboy heir with too much charm and too many fangirls. I tripped in the hallway, fell into his arms, and of course someone took a picture. By lunch, it was circulating on every group chat. He caught her, the caption screamed. They're dating. And finally, Ethan. The genius heir who sat in the front row of every class and corrected the teachers. During group projects, he sneered at my answers, so I snapped back. Turns out no one had ever dared to talk back to him. The next thing I knew, he was following me around with this glint in his eye like I'd unlocked some secret level of his personality. So there I was, tray in hand, standing in the middle of the cafeteria, when it happened. Adrian sat down beside me without a word, his hand casually moving my water bottle aside like he owned the table. Seconds later, Leo dropped into the seat across from me, smirking like he'd planned the whole thing. And then Ethan appeared, sliding into the seat next to Leo, glaring daggers at both of them. The entire cafeteria went dead silent. Forks froze midair. Students leaned over tables, whispering. I sat there with my sandwich, completely trapped, as the 3 most powerful heirs in school stared each other down like I was the prize at the end of a war. Adrian's voice broke the silence first, low and cutting. She's with me. Leo laughed, tossing his apple in the air. Funny. Pretty sure she fell for me first. Ethan adjusted his glasses, his tone sharp. Both of you are delusional. She chose me the second she stood up to me. My sandwich slipped from my hand as every eye in the cafeteria burned into me. And then Adrian slammed his hand on the table. The crowd roared as the first round started. Strength. Of course it had to be strength. A line of ridiculous challenges had been set up on the field like this was some medieval tournament sponsored by luxury brands. First was a tug-of-war with ropes so thick they looked like they'd been stolen from a shipyard, then a weightlifting station complete with gold-plated dumbbells, and finally, a sprint across the track while carrying sandbags that had the school logo embroidered on them. I wanted to melt into the ground. Adrian was first, his expression carved from stone as he grabbed the rope and dragged his opponent, one of the football captains chosen to test the heirs, straight into the mud without even breaking a sweat. The bleachers screamed, students waving homemade signs that read Team Adrian in bold letters. He didn't celebrate, didn't even look at the crowd. His eyes, cold and sharp, found mine instantly. I looked away so fast I nearly fell off the bench. Then came Leo. He sauntered onto the field like it was a runway, winking at every cheerleader and blowing kisses at the bleachers. When he lifted the gold dumbbells, he pretended to struggle before suddenly flexing, sending the crowd into a frenzy. Someone actually fainted. When it came time for the sprint, he carried the sandbags on one shoulder, posed for a photo mid-run, and still crossed the line before his opponent. The students chanted his name like he was a rock star. And finally, Ethan. He didn't bother acknowledging the crowd. He measured the sandbags, calculated his grip, and adjusted his breathing with terrifying precision. Then he demolished every single challenge with mechanical efficiency. He won by pure logic, outmaneuvering his opponents like they were part of a math problem. When he crossed the finish line, he didn't even look winded. The bleachers erupted, students chanting formulas instead of cheers. My best friend tugged on my sleeve, eyes wide. You realize they're doing all of this for you, right? I groaned, burying my face in my hands. I didn't ask for this. But it didn't matter. By the end of round 1, Adrian had silenced the crowd with sheer dominance, Leo had dazzled them with charm, and Ethan had impressed them with cold, calculated skill. The scoreboard flashed all 3 of their names in neon lights, tied for first place. The announcer's voice boomed again. Round 2 tomorrow, intellect. The crowd screamed, already placing bets on who would win. Adrian glanced at me one last time before leaving the field, his gaze heavy with silent possession. Leo winked at me as he blew a kiss, and Ethan adjusted his glasses with a smug look that said he'd already planned his victory. And me? I realized with horror that this wasn't going to end in one day. This was just the beginning. By the time the next day rolled around, the entire school was vibrating with anticipation. Students filled the bleachers again, some with face paint, others waving massive banners like this was the finals of a championship game. Someone even brought an air horn, and the cheer squad had choreographed an actual chant for each air. I couldn't believe this was real life. And yet, there I was, shoved into the front row like a queen awaiting judgment, dreading what was about to unfold. The loudspeaker crackled. "Welcome to round 2, intellect." The crowd erupted into cheers as the 3 heirs stepped onto the stage, each of them radiating confidence in their own way. Ethan looked like he had been born for this, his uniform perfectly pressed, his expression cool, and a stack of notebooks balanced at his side. He was practically vibrating with smug anticipation. Adrian stood tall and silent, his gray eyes sweeping over the crowd with quiet authority, no props, no theatrics, just the sheer weight of his presence. And Leo? Leo sauntered onto the stage with sunglasses perched on his head and a calculator in his hand like it was an accessory. He waved to the crowd as though he was about to perform a concert instead of a quiz. The first challenge was a speed math round. Equations flashed on the screen, and contestants had to buzz in with the correct answer. Ethan was unstoppable, his hand hitting the buzzer before anyone else could even process the numbers. "Correct," the announcer said over and over, his voice practically resigned. Adrian didn't falter though. He took his time, answered slower, but each one was right. The crowd murmured with surprise. The cold air wasn't just brawn, he could hold his own here too. Then came Leo. He leaned back in his chair, waited until Ethan buzzed in with the right answer, and then repeated it loudly as though it was his idea. Somehow, the crowd roared in approval anyway. "Genius," someone shouted. "Unconventional brilliance." I slapped my forehead. Next was literature. Passages from classic novels were read aloud, and contestants had to identify the author and theme. Ethan rattled off answers with flawless precision, his monotone voice making him sound like an encyclopedia. Adrian paused, considered, and gave responses that were sharp, thoughtful, and devastatingly insightful. I caught myself staring as he analyzed a passage, his deep voice wrapping around words like loyalty, betrayal, sacrifice. My heart lurched in my chest. And Leo? Leo misquoted Shakespeare but delivered it with such dramatic flair that half the bleachers swooned anyway. Is this a test of brains or charisma? I muttered under my breath. The final task was a logic puzzle displayed on the big screen. A riddle so complex it had the entire student body scratching their heads. Ethan scribbled furiously in his notebook, muttering formulas under his breath. Adrian leaned back, staring at the problem with calm detachment. Leo stretched, grinned, and randomly guessed. Ethan slammed his buzzer first, launching into a detailed explanation. The announcer opened his mouth, but Adrian buzzed in immediately after. "The answer is the same," Adrian said, his voice level. "But your process is unnecessarily complicated." The crowd gasped as the screen flashed correct under Adrian's name. For the first time, Ethan's composure cracked, his jaw tightening as the students erupted into chants of Adrian's name. Leo, of course, threw his arms up as though he had won anyway, basking in the attention. By the end of round 2, the scoreboard was clear. Ethan had dominated most of the points, but Adrian had stolen the spotlight with his decisive logic. Leo, somehow, still had a fan club declaring him the true winner. As the crowd dispersed, I sat frozen in my seat, my heart pounding. This wasn't just absurd anymore. This was dangerous. Because for the first time, I realized Adrian wasn't just fighting because of ego. He was fighting because of me. And the way he looked at me from the stage, steady and unyielding, made me realize one terrifying truth: I was starting to look back. By day 3, the school was in full chaos. The bleachers overflowed before classes even started, the hallways plastered with posters declaring loyalty to one heir or another. Teachers had completely given up, some of them even wearing the pins students had made. One math teacher sported a Team Ethan badge while the gym coach strutted around with a massive Team Leo foam finger. I wanted to crawl under a desk and never come out. The loudspeaker crackled again, and the announcer's voice boomed with exaggerated excitement. Welcome to the final round of the heir trials. Character. The crowd roared so loud my ears rang. My best friend tugged on my arm, barely containing her laughter. They're going to try to prove their personalities to you. This is going to be a train wreck. She wasn't wrong. The first task was chivalry. The heirs were instructed to perform a grand romantic gesture that proved their worth. Leo started forward first, roses spilling from his arms, confetti cannons blasting behind him as he knelt dramatically on one knee. Sweetheart, you're the only girl in this school worth my time, he declared, loud enough for the entire city to hear. The bleachers screamed, girls swooning like they were watching the climax of a romance movie. Adrian's eyes narrowed like he was about to snap the roses in half. Then Ethan stepped up. No roses, no theatrics. Instead he pulled out a handwritten contract, pages of neat calculations scrawled across it. I've mapped out our compatibility over time. Statistically, we are a perfect match. This is a 50-page proof of why I should be chosen. He handed it to me like it was a love letter. The crowd went wild, chanting equations and formulas. I buried my face in my hands, wishing the earth would swallow me. Then it was Adrian's turn. He didn't bring flowers or documents. He simply walked over to where I sat, reached down, and gently pulled the crushed water bottle Leo had taken from me on day one out of his pocket. My breath hitched. He set it on the table in front of me, his gray eyes steady on mine. I don't need gestures. I was the first one to notice her. I'll be the last one standing beside her. The silence that followed was so intense it felt like the air had been sucked out of the stadium. Then the bleachers exploded, chants of Adrian's name drowning everything else out. My heart slammed against my ribs, heat rushing to my face as his gaze held mine just a second longer before he turned away. The second task was kindness. Each heir had to perform a good deed on the spot. Leo immediately grabbed a random kid from the bleachers, lifted him onto his shoulders, and shouted, "Free rides for everyone." Ethan sat down with a group of freshmen, explaining algebra until they cheered like he had taught them the secrets of the universe. Adrian didn't move until someone in the crowd sneezed. He pulled a handkerchief from his pocket, handed it to them without a word, and walked back. The simplicity of it silenced the crowd for a moment before the cheers erupted again. By the time the tasks ended, the field was chaos. The scoreboard flickered, the crowd screamed, factions waving their banners so hard it looked like a revolution. And me? I sat frozen in my seat, clutching Ethan's absurd 50-page contract with Leo's roses at my feet and Adrian's water bottle glinting in the sunlight. The announcer shouted into the mic, "The winner will be revealed after the votes are counted." But I knew deep in my chest that no matter what the scoreboard said, this wasn't about points anymore. Because when Adrian's eyes found mine through the chaos, unyielding and terrifyingly certain, I realized he wasn't waiting for a scoreboard to tell him he'd won. He already believed I was his. By the end of round 3, the school was split into factions so intense it felt like the entire campus had turned into a battlefield. Team Adrian students marched through the hallways in matching black armbands, chanting about loyalty and strength. Team Leo threw wild rallies in the cafeteria complete with music, roses, and pizza bribes. Team Ethan set up tutoring stations and handed out flyers with graphs that somehow compared my compatibility with him to economic growth charts. Teachers stopped trying to stop it. They were in too deep. The chemistry teacher wore a Team Adrian sticker, the librarian had a Team Ethan bookmark, and the janitor strolled around in a Team Leo baseball cap. It was madness. I spent the day hiding in the library, clutching my head as my best friend scrolled through the school's gossip forum, laughing until she cried. "You're trending," she said, shoving the phone at me. "Look, #AirWars is #1. They've turned you into a meme." My face burned as I looked at the posts. Pictures of me between the three heirs, captions like "Choose wisely, Queen." A sketch of me wearing a crown with the heirs kneeling at my feet. One video had already hit 1 million views. By the time classes ended, my stomach hurt from the stress. I just wanted to go home, crawl into bed, and pretend this was a fever dream. But of course, the heirs wouldn't allow that. As I walked toward the gate, all three of them appeared at once. Adrian stood tall and silent, his eyes locked on me like I was the only thing in the world that mattered. Leo leaned against his car with a smirk, tossing a rose lazily from hand to hand. Ethan adjusted his glasses, holding what looked suspiciously like another contract. The crowd of students followed, forming a circle like vultures ready for the kill. "Enough," I snapped, my voice sharper than I'd ever heard it. "I'm not a prize. I didn't ask for this circus. I'm not yours to fight over." The words echoed in the silence, sharp and raw, and for a moment I thought they might actually hear me. But then Leo chuckled, tossing the rose at my feet. "You keep saying that, sweetheart, but look around. The whole school already knows you belong to one of us." Ethan stepped forward, holding out his papers. "You can deny it all you want, but every calculation, every interaction points to me. You and I are inevitable." Adrian didn't move. He didn't speak. He just looked at me, his eyes dark and unreadable, until finally he said, "She doesn't need to choose tonight." His voice was low, almost gentle, but it carried more weight than the other two combined. "Because she already knows." My chest tightened, my breath catching as the crowd erupted into fresh whispers. For once, there was no smirk, no arrogance, no smug superiority in his tone. Just certainty. And it was that certainty that terrified me most of all. The tension didn't break after Adrian's words, it thickened, clinging to the air like smoke. Students whispered furiously, phones raised to capture every angle, waiting for me to confirm or deny what Adrian had just said. My heart hammered so loudly I was sure it could be heard over the crowd. Leo pushed off his car, his smirk dropping into something sharper. "So that's it then? You just declare she's yours and we're supposed to roll over?" His voice dripped mockery, but beneath it was anger. Ethan adjusted his glasses, his tone clipped and precise. "You're both delusional. She's rational. She won't be swayed by possessive declarations or shallow charm. She'll choose based on facts. And the fact is, she and I are enough," Adrian snapped, his voice cutting through Ethan's logic like a blade. He finally stepped forward, his hide casting a shadow over both of them, his gray eyes glinting like steel. "You think this is about trials or points or who can shout the loudest? It isn't. It's about the simple truth none of you are willing to admit." He turned to me then, and my breath caught as the crowd leaned forward collectively, hanging on every word. "I don't care what game they think this is. I don't care what the scoreboard says. You're mine. And I won't let anyone take you from me." My chest seized, heat rushing through me as the world seemed to tilt on its axis. Leo barked out a laugh, but it was strained. "You think you can just claim her? Like that?" Adrian didn't look at him. His gaze never left mine. "It's not claiming. It's recognizing. And she knows it too." My knees wobbled under the weight of his words, my mind screaming at me to deny it, to push him away, to cling to the safety of denial. But deep down, some part of me already knew he was right. Leo stepped closer, his grin returning though his eyes were sharp. "Guess we'll see if she agrees with you." Ethan moved in as well, his voice calm but seething with quiet certainty. "She will choose. And when she does, it will not be you." The circle of students closed tighter, the chants of their names clashing in the air like war drums. I stood at the center, every nerve in my body on fire, my hands trembling as Adrian's certainty collided with Leo's defiance and Ethan's logic. And in that moment, I realized the war wasn't about the trials anymore. It was about me. And whichever choice I made, nothing in this school, or my life, would ever be the same again. The noise around me rose into a storm, voices chanting, phones flashing, the entire school demanding I make a choice right there on the pavement. My hands shook at my sides, my throat tight as Adrian, Leo, and Ethan closed in, three shadows that had swallowed my life whole. Leo was the first to break the silence, his grin reckless, desperate. "Come on, sweetheart. We all know I'm the one who makes you smile. Choose fun. Choose freedom." He spread his arms like the entire world belonged to him, and for a moment the crowd roared his name so loudly it almost convinced me he was right. Ethan stepped in next, adjusting his glasses with deliberate calm. "Don't be manipulated by theatrics. Think clearly. Logically. You need stability, a partner who can match your mind, who can secure your future. That's me." His voice was steady, certain, but his eyes flickered with something raw, fear, maybe, though he'd never admit it. And then Adrian moved. He didn't smile. He didn't posture. He just stepped closer, his presence so overwhelming the crowd fell into silence. He looked at me like there was no one else in the world, his storm gray eyes steady, unyielding. "You don't need me to make promises. You already know," he said quietly, his voice carrying through the air like a vow. "I won't let you go. Not now. Not ever." My chest clenched, my lungs refusing to work as the crowd erupted again, the chants deafening. My best friend's voice cut through, screaming, "Choose already," and suddenly every eye in the school was on me, waiting, watching. I could have laughed at the absurdity of it all, if it weren't for the fact that my heart was tearing itself in two. Leo's charm, Ethan's certainty, Adrian's intensity, it all collided inside me until I couldn't breathe. But then I looked into Adrian's eyes, really looked, and saw the cracks beneath the ice, the truth he had been fighting to keep hidden. He wasn't just cold, he wasn't just ruthless. He was terrified. Terrified of losing me. And that was when I knew. My voice shook, but it cut through the roar like a blade. "It's Adrian." The crowd gasped, phones flashing, students screaming as if the school had just witnessed history. Leo froze, his grin slipping for the first time, replaced by disbelief. Ethan's jaw clenched, his papers crumpling in his fist. But Adrian didn't flinch. He just reached for my hand, steady, certain, grounding. The chaos roared on around us, factions collapsing into uproar, but none of it mattered. He leaned close, his breath brushing my ear, his words meant only for me. "You were mine from the start. Now everyone knows it." My heart raced as he led me away, the crowd parting like the sea, my life changed forever. The war was over, but the fire he had lit inside me was only just beginning. The sound of Adrian's palm slamming against the cafeteria table echoed like a gunshot, rattling trays and sending a hush through the room so deep you could hear the vending machine humming across the hall. My sandwich sat half-squashed on my plate, untouched, while three of the most powerful heirs in the entire school stared each other down like gladiators. Adrian's storm gray eyes cut through Leo with the same ruthless precision he used to silence the entire student council. "She borrowed my pen," he said flatly, his voice calm but carrying the weight of a final verdict. "That means she's mine." Around us, gasps rippled through the crowd. People were already typing furiously on their phones, no doubt live-blogging every word into the gossip group chat that functioned like the school's unofficial news outlet. Leo leaned back in his chair, tossing his apple in the air before catching it again with a smirk. "Oh please. If we're using pens as engagement rings now, then half the school belongs to you." He winked at me, the glint in his golden brown eyes enough to make three girls at the next table swoon audibly. But she didn't fall into their arms. The photo. I could practically hear the whispers spreading like wildfire, the infamous hallway picture of me colliding into Leo's chest, his arms steadying me, his smile gleaming like a toothpaste commercial. It had gone viral before I even made it to lunch. Now he was weaponizing it. Ethan, of course, wasn't going to let either of them win. He adjusted his glasses with one hand, the other tugging my tray just slightly closer to him like I was a research project he'd just claimed ownership over. "You're both idiots," he said, his tone clipped and superior. "She doesn't care about cheap theatrics. She cares about intellect. She chose me the second she didn't let me dominate our group project. Which, for the record, is the first time anyone has had the courage, or the intelligence, to actually correct me. His eyes flicked toward me, sharp and calculating, like he was dissecting me under a microscope. My jaw dropped, heat rushing to my cheeks as the cafeteria collectively leaned closer. "Excuse me?" I hissed, clutching at what remained of my sandwich like it could shield me. "I didn't choose anybody. I was just trying to eat lunch." My voice cracked, echoing through the silence, and for a moment I thought the madness might actually end. But instead, Adrian reached over, plucked the crushed sandwich from my hand, and set it down on his tray as if it belonged to him now too. "She's with me," he repeated, tone final, his hand brushing so close to mine that I jerked back like I'd been burned. Leo snorted, kicking his chair back with a screech of metal on tile as he leaned across the table, his grin widening like this was the best entertainment he'd had all week. "You think you can stake a claim on her because of a pen?" She was in my arms, Adrian. My arms. And she didn't run away screaming, so I'd say that makes me the obvious choice. "You caught her because she tripped," Ethan snapped, his calm demeanor cracking just enough to reveal the irritation beneath. "Gravity isn't romance, Leo." "But defiance?" His eyes slid back to me, intense and unblinking. "Defiance is." My throat closed as every gaze in the cafeteria swung back to me, waiting for my reaction, waiting for me to declare allegiance to one of the 3 richest heirs in school like I was some kind of trophy in a twisted social Olympics. My phone buzzed in my pocket, probably my friends in all caps. "What is happening? Why are they fighting over you?" I wanted to answer, I wanted to scream that I had no idea, but the word stuck as Adrian's hand slammed against the table a second time, harder, making my tray jump. He leaned in, his voice low and sharp, meant only for me. "Say it," he ordered. "Say you're with me." My chest seized, every nerve in my body sparking under the weight of his command, while Leo leaned closer with his smug grin and Ethan's eyes narrowed with dangerous intent. The entire cafeteria was watching. My life had turned into a circus. And I was the unwilling ringmaster. I could feel the heat of 100 pairs of eyes drilling into me as Adrian's words echoed through the cafeteria like an unbreakable command. "Say you're with me." My throat was dry, my palms sweaty, and my brain refused to form a single coherent thought. The problem wasn't just Adrian's ruthless gaze pinning me down, or Leo's lazy smirk daring me to pick him, or Ethan's razor-sharp stare dissecting me like I was a problem set he refused to get wrong. The real problem was that this entire scene had turned into a school-wide spectacle, one I hadn't signed up for but apparently couldn't escape. "What is wrong with all of you?" I blurted out, louder than I intended. My voice cracked across the silence, ricocheting off the walls. A few students snickered. Someone at the back yelled, "Fight! Fight! Fight!" and suddenly phones were raised higher, recording from every angle. Adrian's jaw tightened, his hand curling into a fist on the table, but he didn't look away. "I'm not playing games," he said evenly, his voice calm in a way that was somehow more terrifying than yelling. "I don't share." Leo cackled, tossing his apple into the air and catching it with irritating ease. "Newsflash, Adrian, she's not a stock in your precious portfolio. You can't just claim her and call it a day. Besides," his grin widened, his eyes flicking to me, "I already know she prefers a little fun, not a life sentence of rules and silence." The crowd gasped, scandalized, while several girls at the far table fanned themselves as if they were watching a K-drama unfold in real life. Adrian's glare darkened like thunderclouds, but before he could speak, Ethan leaned forward, his elbows resting neatly on the table, his voice carrying the smug precision of someone delivering a final argument. "Both of you are embarrassing yourselves. She's not impressed by arrogance or theatrics. She values intellect. She proved it when she stood up to me in class. She doesn't want power or charm, she wants someone who understands her." His words cut like a knife, sharp and deliberate, and I nearly choked on air. "Excuse me?" I sputtered. "I stood up to you because you were wrong about mitochondria being classified as semi-autonomous. A wave of laughter rolled across the cafeteria, but Ethan didn't flinch. His lips twitched into something almost like a smile. Exactly. You didn't let me dominate the project. That's why you belong with me. My face burned. I opened my mouth to argue, but Adrian suddenly pushed back his chair, the leg scraping harshly against the floor, and the sound silenced the laughter in an instant. He rose to his full height, every inch of his posture screaming authority, his shadow falling across me like a shroud. Enough, he said, his tone low but resonant. He turned his head just enough to glare at the other two heirs, his eyes like ice. If you want to fight, then fight me. But don't drag her into this circus. For a split second, hope flared in my chest, maybe he was finally going to put an end to this nightmare, but then Leo leapt up too, tossing his apple so hard it splattered against the far wall. Perfect, he said with a grin, his energy buzzing like live wire. Let's settle it. Winner takes her. The cafeteria erupted, the chant of fight. Fight. Fight, growing louder, students climbing onto benches for a better view. Ethan stood last, slower, calmer, adjusting his glasses like he was about to walk into a courtroom instead of a brawl. Agreed, he said, his eyes glinting. But it won't be determined by fists. It should be measured by intellect and logic. Boring, Leo groaned. I say whoever she kisses first wins. The entire cafeteria gasped so loudly it might have rattled the windows. My jaw dropped. What is wrong with you? But Adrian's hand landed on my chair, steady and firm, his presence overwhelming as he leaned close, his breath brushing my ear. Ignore them, he whispered, his voice sharp, dangerous, intimate. You'll choose me in the end. My heart stuttered so violently I almost forgot to breathe. Around us the chants grew louder, the air squared off, and I realized with dawning horror that I wasn't just caught in their rivalry anymore. I was the prize. And they weren't going to stop until one of them won. The cafeteria had transformed into a battlefield, and somehow I was the unwilling trophy in the middle of it. The chant of fight 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 grew so loud that even the teachers poked their heads in from the hall, only to back off when they saw who was involved. No one wanted to step into a war between the three richest heirs in school. Adrian stood like a general about to march into war, his gray eyes locked on Leo with an intensity that could melt steel. His voice cut through the noise with lethal calm. This ends now. Leo just grinned wider, his energy wild, his charm untamed. Sure, it ends now, when you admit I win. He grabbed my half-empty water bottle off the table and raised it like a toast. She practically fell into my arms. That's destiny, Adrian. The crowd held an agreement, some chanting Leo's name. Adrian's glare deepened, but before he could react, Ethan cleared his throat, adjusting his glasses with a deliberate precision. You are both primitive, he announced, his tone loud enough to silence the crowd. The only fair way to decide this is with logic. She should choose based on merit. Who can offer her the most stability, the brightest future, the strongest foundation? He turned his gaze on me, sharp and expectant. And that is clearly me. Laughter rippled through the cafeteria, students whispering like they were betting on who I would pick. My heart hammered as every set of eyes turned toward me. I'm not choosing anyone. I shouted, my voice cracking through the noise. For a brief moment, silence fell. And then Leo leaned across the table, his grin infuriatingly smug. Fine. Then we'll make you choose. He tossed the water bottle from hand to hand like it was some kind of game. Tomorrow. Sports field. 3 trials. Winner gets her. The cafeteria erupted with cheers so loud I thought the ceiling might cave in. People stomped their feet, chanting, laughing, already spreading the news across every group chat. Adrian's jaw flexed as he stared at Leo like he wanted to snap him in half. You're delusional, he said coldly. I don't need a trial to prove she's mine. You're scared, Leo shot back, flashing his teeth. Ethan's voice cut through, calm and steady, but edged with smug superiority. If this is going to happen, then it should be measured properly. 3 categories: intellect, strength, and character. I will win all 3. My mouth dropped open. You cannot be serious. But no one heard me over the roar of the cafeteria. Adrian's hand brushed my shoulder, his touch firm, anchoring, his voice low enough that only I could hear. Stay out of it. Let us handle this. My chest seized. Handle what? Me? I'm not a trophy to be passed around. He didn't answer. His eyes stayed locked on Leo and Ethan, his posture rigid, his jaw tight. The bell finally rang, scattering students reluctantly, but the damage was done. By the end of the day, posters had already appeared on hallway walls: the air trials. Tomorrow at noon. Be there. My name was scrawled across every one of them like I was some prize in a circus. And as I tore one down, crumpling it in my fist, a realization hit me that sent chills racing through my body. They weren't going to stop. Not until one of them had me. And somehow, without meaning to, I had started a war. By the next morning the entire school was buzzing. People whispered in the halls, pointing at me like I was walking headline news. Some were wearing pins with Adrian's initials scribbled on them, others had Leo's name written in glitter across their notebooks, and a small but terrifying group carried signs that said Team Ethan with equations scrawled underneath. It felt less like school and more like a fan convention dedicated to my impending humiliation. My best friend nearly choked on her juice box when she shoved one of the posters into my hands. The air trials, I read out loud, my voice dripping disbelief. Are they serious? She nodded, wide-eyed. They booked the sports field. They got the principal to approve it. Well, they didn't really ask. But still. I wanted to crawl into a hole and never come out. Instead, I dragged myself to class, only to find Adrian already sitting at my desk. His suit jacket hung perfectly, his tie immaculate, his entire presence radiating control. The other students parted around him like he owned the place, which he basically did. We're walking to the field together, he said flatly, not looking up from his notebook. No, I snapped. I'm not going to any stupid trial. His eyes lifted then, gray and piercing. You don't have a choice. My blood boiled. Of course I do. I'm not some prize for you to fight over. His gaze didn't soften, but his voice dropped lower, rougher. You think this is about a prize? This is about making sure the other 2 back off. Before I could respond, Leo strolled in, tossing his backpack onto my desk with a grin that made 3 girls swoon instantly. Don't let him fool you, sweetheart, he drawled. This is about fun. And you love fun, don't you? I opened my mouth to scream at him, but Ethan appeared behind us, perfectly pressed uniform, expression calm but smug. Actually, this is about merit. And by tomorrow, it will be proven that you're better off with me. I slammed my hands onto the desk, nearly knocking over Leo's backpack. You're all insane. But my protest didn't matter. By noon, the entire school had gathered on the sports field. Bleachers overflowed with students chanting names, holding banners, waving glow sticks like this was a concert. A loudspeaker crackled to life. Welcome to the first ever air trials, someone shouted. Round 1, strength. My stomach dropped as Adrian stepped onto the field first, sleeves rolled, jaw set. Leo stretched like he was about to film a commercial, blowing kisses to the crowd. Ethan adjusted his gloves, muttering calculations under his breath. And me? I sat in the middle of the chaos, face buried in my hands, realizing my life had officially spiraled into something I would never live down. The whistle blew, and the trials began.